Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It is currently January 11th, 2010, and this is Day 9 Daily number 46. You may or may not know this, but I just started the stream over again because I was talking with my microphone. Whoops, I drooled. I was talking with my microphone turned off. It was completely off, and I was really excited. I was doing my little faces at the camera, and absolutely nobody could hear me. So now we're going to go ahead and do a little bit of Day 9 Daily number 46 today. We're doing Flash versus Really, who apparently changed his name to Seiya or something like that, but it's Really. And I specifically chose this match for two reasons. First of all, Flash loses this game and ends his 23-game, I believe, win streak in Terran vs. Terran. He's either 22 or 23, a.k.a. a really long win streak, right? Flash is really snapping necks in Terran vs. Terran for quite some time. But second of all, because of an excellent comment that Really made in the interview about seeing something and immediately making some broad decisions based upon that. And I'm not going to say what it is right now. I'm going to happily spoil the results of the game, but not spoil what it is he was talking about in the interview. So I just like that. I liked what Really said, and again, I'm going to be intentionally vague about this, because a lot of people tend to kind of fall into two categories. Like, for instance, a lot in the lower echelon of players, we get people who start off and they overthink things a little too much, that they try to, first of all, rely so much on the element of surprise, or once they don't have the element of surprise anymore, they feel like they can't do it. Like, oh, opening up for a vulture drop, in Terran vs. Protoss, what if he expects it? Won't he just kill my dropship? Well, if you time it properly, it should work anyways, and these sorts of things. And then once you get past that, then we start getting to the players who realize that if they just have very, very good execution and pull their build orders off, that they can actually win a great deal of games. But what's interesting is once you get to that next step, you kind of forget what you used to do when you were a younger player, which was to make some sort of wild change or some broad assumption based upon what you saw your opponent do. And that's what Really did. He saw a fairly normal sort of play for Flash to do, and made some excellent wild changes in his play that were the correct ones. And though it all looked smooth in the interview, he revealed that it was a fairly telling moment in the game. So we're going to go ahead and talk a little bit about that. My orange ball's a little bit huge, so hopefully I won't keep this on the screen too much. I definitely need to shrink that a little bit, because again, I just recently upgraded to the most recent version of Procaster to prevent crashing and that sort of thing. So yeah, there we have Really, aka Seiya, spawning at the top right, and in the bottom left we have Flash. Oh, obviously I forgot to talk about the map. So this is match point that we have right here. In Terran vs. Terran, I don't want to spend too much time blabbering on about the game, but the most important things to note are this part right here. And here, right by the naturals, you can do a lot of pushes here. Early vulture harass is particularly effective, just because this is a little bit open. Not super, super effective, but I think mining up this area and gaining a little bit of control can be very beneficial. Because honestly, if I plant some mines right here, and I've wandered up here, and my opponent's up in this top right, if I've planted some mines here, and I've controlled this portion, if I even see any vultures move this way, I can immediately dart down and block him off at this ridge and still get that little bit of high ground advantage. So really getting control of your opponent's high ground pod is pretty key, thereby controlling your own high ground pod key. But also I think another significant thing to note is that the split on the map is vertical, which is, in other words, very difficult to defend for dropships. If this was like Sinchu Ryong, we'd have a split like this, which means you can plant some turrets along like this, and then you're fine. You can create this solid wall of turrets over a fairly short distance and be okay. But once you get vertical, it's a little tricky. Obviously, this terrain sort of prevents that, so late game drop antics can be particularly devastating, and getting control of these expansions is a little bit funky as well. But again, this is the vulnerable spots we're going to be thinking about right here early on, and also vulture harass going into the mid stages of the game. This was a really awesome match. Istro's up on KTF 2-0, which is obviously good, so Flash must really be feeling the pressure right now, really thinking, why is it that my team always gets 3-0'd, except for me, I always win my game? There's Gosi Flying, who's been showing us some very fancy Protoss skills, and we see his Zerg player completely disinterested to his left. But anyways, back right here to watching Flash mine those minerals. That's something that is really interesting about KTF is I think of all teams, they have the most interesting distribution of records because a lot of times they'll get 3-1'd because Flash, always wins his game, and the rest of KTF will sort of fail it up. But then, they'll occasionally be down 2-1, and they really need that fourth set player to win along with Flash. And then, of course, Flash comes out in the fifth game. Ooh, Flash got a little bit of eye twitching there. Either that or he's just winking at his SCVs, trying to seduce them into mining a little bit faster. But then occasionally, every now and again, KT's other players really come into full stride and end up crushing their other team like 3-0, 3-1, that sort of thing. So it's always really fun to watch KTF play because I really genuinely have absolutely no idea how it's going to go. A team like Air Force Ace, you can expect to get 3-0'd or 2-3'd or something like that, but man, these people are blown away to be on television. And she needs to fix her hair. Alright, great. Now we're actually starting to get into some meat that I can talk about. We do see these barracks going down here. This is a nice little cute Wallen being planted down there. And notice that Wallen is not just useful in the early stages of the game. That can also be potentially useful right here. If your opponent is running some vultures in, you can immediately plant some sort of structure right there to block off the vultures from getting into your main. Good little tactic. Right here we see really doing the, very normal technique, which is to build the barracks a little farther away from your main, so that way you can end up advancing this barracks to scout a little bit earlier on, and of course pulling the guys out of gas, because a very common technique in this matchup is to just get one factory and one vulture and just immediately expand, and then get the add-on, and then get a second factory. So, usual sort of technique. We want to pull the guys out of gas so that way we can end up mining a little bit more quickly. So that's a nice little tactic to employ. Pulling guys in and out of gas is a key skill that will allow you to get a little bit of an extra edge, maybe one out of every, 20, 30 games. You'll enter into the late game, and because you'll have that one extra unit that you'll be able to win a little more easily, so definitely do that. I guess in the early game, like right now, it's pretty huge being able to pull two guys off, but even in the late game, you should consider times when you don't necessarily need that extra gas, because a lot of players just default into it. So yeah, we see really doing everything that we were just talking about, going ahead and expanding there. We see this little Wallen. We see really treating it like outsider and just supply depoting his way over. Notice the fact that Flash has not made any Marines. It's a really interesting sacrifice. He's just walling himself in, and we see him going directly for that add-on with that factory. We see his eye has stopped twitching. He's regained focus once more. But see, everything really is doing is very, very standard. The one difference I would note about what Really's doing with this expansion, what Flash is doing, is that Really is going to get his expansion up. The command centers, though they'll finish at the same time, Really's command center is going to be a little bit ahead because he's obviously started it right here at the expansion. What allows him to do that is the fact that he's using this factory right here on the minimap. Really, my entire orange ball is covering it up. Or excuse me, my yellow ball. But I'm just going to circle it a little bit. This factory right here, with the Vulture coming out, is going to allow him enough control to secure that right away. Flash, on the other hand, is going for the slightly later command center, again finishing the same time as Really's. But he's going to lift that off, and instead of getting any Vultures at all, he's going to go straight away to the factory tech. So that's pretty interesting. And it looks like Really has responded to this by giving his own factory up as well. I mean, he got that SCV scout right in there, so he knows exactly what's going on, no confusion at all. And occasionally, when you do this wall, and you can even get away with not making that Marine. So we're going to hopefully end up clicking on something. I'm eagerly awaiting for this Observer. The Observer keeps teasing me. Yeah, see, there's the first Vulture that came out of that factory. Really, really useful. And see, the second factory is coming down now for both players. And, of course, really getting the slightly earlier expansion. But nothing too extreme happening right now. Obviously, if you're, a budding Terran versus Terran player, this is a very easy build to mimic. As I've said before, I like one factory, one starport plays because, I like having the Wraith and its utility and that sort of thing. But, honestly, doing this one factory, ultra-fast expand, and then getting the second factory is so easy and really effective to do. Excuse me. Planting some mines, this is interesting to send a Vulture out quite so early, but obviously we're starting to see why it's so good. And Flash, getting these tanks a little bit earlier. We see some vultures coming out for really, but huge muscle for Flash early. Yeah, and look at the timing on that transfer. Adding on another factory, probably going for a lot of vultures on this map. Because again, there's a lot of weird, funky terrain to control. And we're seeing Red, really already get some good control set up. Now what we're starting to see is a little bit of back-teching. This is a very nice, common technique to do in this matchup. Just get 1 to 2 tanks for defense and then immediately flood with a whole bunch of vultures. If you're really, you can use these mines to delay those tanks by quite a bit, because you defend any really threatening unit with the mines, and then the vultures, you already have more vultures because you started producing them earlier. And there, look how many vultures they are. They're slow vultures, though, which is a little bit icky. You don't like anything slow in StarCraft. Mining up all these key locations. And a lot of this is also key scout paths, because, I mean, really, or excuse me, key movement paths for the opponent's vultures, because, I mean, think about these mines in the middle. Those really aren't going to be too useful. I mean, even look, they're a little bit down. I'm going to bring up the main map. We're actually seeing the mines right here on the mini-map. See, they're right there at the bottom of this big patch. So, for instance, if Flash wanted to push, he would kind of walk right over it to here. But what putting mines here does is it spots any vultures that are trying to do this path. It spots anything that's trying to control this high ground pod. Again, I want to constantly re-emphasize the importance of taking that high ground pod and being the man about it. Just planting mines, securing it up. See the Goliaths popping out. Now this can be a little bit suspicious. You're already seeing some Goliaths come out super early, but it's not necessarily so telling of what Flash could possibly be doing. A lot of players like to get that early armory out, to get upgrades headed out right away, because then that way they can get the +2 attack upgrade, which allows my tanks to kill your tanks in 2 hits instead of 3. Both players getting the starport out now. This map, because it's so spread out, because you kind of have to continually elongate, dropship harass around this stage right when you're focusing on taking your third, can be a little bit more potent. Oh, clearing out the mines. That's one thing that's really good to do, is when you have your barracks, you can just make a few extra marines if your opponent is planning a bazillion mines, and just suicide it forward. Use the marines to clear mines, because that's, especially if you're trying to do some sort of push and you don't have the time to wait around for scan and everything, that can be very effective. So right now, the trade-off that we're seeing occur right here is that really is, I guess I want to do this from Flash's point of view. Flash is sacrificing a lot of map control. I mean, obviously, look at the mini-map. Look how much red has extended to the left, and look how Flash is just sort of hanging out on his own. He's sacrificed the map control. In other words, he's made fewer vultures. And he's, oh, let's see if we end up making this little wall here. Oh, man, that would have been a good opportunity to do that. But yeah, so Flash sacrifices map control by not making vultures, and instead goes for a very muscular army. We're seeing him already getting his tanks established. We're seeing these Goliaths already getting ready. And if you're preparing for a drop-oriented mid-game, it's nice to have already begun stockpiling all those drop-friendly units early on. The Goliaths, the tanks, basically not vultures. But right now is the moment where really was saying that he felt like he'd won the game, where he was feeling in very good shape, because he sees this Goliath drop, and he saw the number of Goliaths actually right over here, and he said that, quote, I immediately knew that or I shouldn't say quote, because I'm going to butcher, I don't remember verbatim what he said, but he said along the lines of, he went for Goliaths instead of for vultures, so I knew that my vultures were going to be doing significantly more damage. And it is a little bit more expensive to go for those muscular units, to go for the Goliaths and the tanks. So that's why we only still see 2 factories for Flash. And this is, this was very, very standard in early Terran vs. Terrans. It's become less common over time, but I still consider it to be a standard play, something that you need to consider. And of course, this mine harass is just doing tons of damage. I mean, we're already seeing how few vultures, or excuse me, how few SCVs. I mean, look at the SCV count. You can kind of see the faint overlay. Let me actually back it up a little bit. There's not that many vultures. God, there's not many SCVs there. When I say vultures, what I really mean are workers, right? Yeah, so here's the Goliath drop, trying to do a little bit of damage. Quite a bunch of workers there. Flash doing a pretty good job. Everything's going great. Yeah, so here come the vultures in. Now we're going to go to Reilly's first-person point of view. I just rewinded it. So here, look, there's not that many SCVs there. Look how many more SCVs were in Reilly's base in that just few seconds. Tons of them. And now this tank vulture push is going to be really, really nice. Because Reilly pretty much knows that his opponent doesn't have any units in the middle of the map. That's what's nice about those vultures early on. That's why a lot of players in this matchup opt to do big vulture pressure early on. Not just because we have the potential to do serious damage, because we help set up our mid-game attacks. Oh, that's so subtle and so sexy. Who really is going to plant mines there? Again, that's one of those little things that you should think about incorporating into your play. So just to sort of talk about how this may have gone in Reilly's practice games, where Reilly had these bases set up, and every now and again he's going to be trying to do some sort of vulture dropship harass. You know, he might not, whoopsie daisies, he might not have planned on doing tons of vulture harass right now, or let me try it again. He may not have tried to plan out a ton of vulture harass in his practice games, but again, upon seeing those early Goliaths and that Goliath drop, he knew his opponent didn't have that many vultures, thereby his harassment would be a little bit more effective, because the tanks and the Goliaths are a little bit slow and difficult to manage against mines when they're in your own base. And in those occasional scenarios where Reilly would be doing this vulture with dropship harass, he probably had a little bit of trouble with a push like this, swinging around and gaining control of this high ground region. So a little thing like that can be instrumental, just to say, oh hey, I'm doing this harass anyways. And even though it didn't manage to kill anything off, now he knows, he's completely aware. Oh man, that was a power sneeze, man. I felt some of my brain eject onto the microphone. Hope that wasn't too loud. But look how many more... I always do this. I always do it one frame too late. Now you always see me doing it half a frame too late. But look, only 4 tanks here. Look how many more tanks. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And 2 Goliaths. Pretty damn big army compared to Reilly's. And we even have more tanks in Flash's main. And look at this. Flash is just going to advance really aggressively forward. Very nice sieging up just out of range and using these other 3 tanks to push. Ooh, man, that was so close. Man, I couldn't believe that Flash was able to finally kill that thing off, man. That mine was about to blow, and oof. Very nice timing. So notice in the process of doing this early push, Flash is not dedicating himself to getting a ton of dropships. Now, I'm not saying that getting a ton of dropships this early is awful, but it's definitely dangerous. You definitely have to be really careful and have a very good plan of exactly what you're going to do with those dropships. Because if notice here that Reilly has made all these vultures, which were doing some damage. He's probably lost at least 11 or 12 vultures inside of Flash's main. And Reilly was still able to hold off Flash's push, a push that had been really under construction from the moment Flash's factories finished. Flash had devoted all his factory time to making tanks and Goliaths to make sure he had a big, strong push, and really was still able to hold it off. And imagine then if Flash had spent even more money on all those dropships, it may have been increasingly difficult to even have enough units to pierce any vulnerable location. So, again, just as a word of warning, if you want to do that sort of dropship stuff, like a big dropship action early on, have a very solid plan. So we're seeing Reilly right now. The fact that Reilly's able to take this expansion and the fact that Reilly appears to be in a lead, I think is a result of this harass that happened in the main. The 2 dropships worth of vultures, and of course now this 3rd one, and these vultures that came in the front pretty early on. Right when the dropship was heading over this way for Flash, Reilly swooped in. Again, because he saw those early Goliaths. And Reilly's continuing on with his plan. Often in this matchup, whoopsie daisies, unplug my subwoofer. There we go. Often in this matchup, you'll see Terran players stop making vultures around this point in time. I mean, we're pretty far into the game at this point, probably about 10 minutes or so. But again, to illustrate, on this map, because everything is so open and weird and curly and all over the place, the vultures still maintain their efficiency throughout the game. Look at this gentle ramping up of the dropship count. Just 2 dropships now from really. This sort of harass is what really... Oh god, this actually gives me a lot of trouble when I play this matchup, is this, when my opponent does something weird like this. That sort of timing can be a serious pain. I mean, like, because normally, you know, you're used to, you know, one dropship coming in with some Goliaths, more commonly Vultures, and every now and again you'll get a player to drop, you know, 2 tanks just sort of naked in the back of your base. But when these 2 tanks come in, I mean, look at the position that Flash is in. Flash is trying to set up this expansion. He's trying to put pressure on. Everything Flash wants to be doing is heading out into the middle of the map. And this composition comes in right at sort of a key pain-in-the-ass time. So, again, if you are a young, budding Terran vs. Terran player, and you have a starport ready, you're thinking about when you want to be doing drop action, look at the state of your build, and then try to wait until your opponent is just starting to take this expansion, just starting to move out into the middle of the map, and that's when you want your dropships to be done so that you can do that sort of drop. Yeah. Oh yeah, now we have 3 dropships coming out. I do... What I just did there, where I described sort of how to create this timing, watching your own replays, is something I want to start doing just a little bit more of. Because, yeah, you know, it's great to look at all this stuff and be like, Really's doing this, isn't that awesome? Flash is doing this, isn't that awesome? And a lot of people who will watch it will you know, be like, yeah, I understand that, everything seems great, and then they'll go play their own games, and it just won't feel right, you know? They'll see this 2 dropship harass from Really, and then they'll just suddenly try to build 2 dropships and run in there, and it won't work, and then it will continue to not work, and then every so often it will do tons of damage, and it will seem a little bit, you know, a little elusive as to why that's so. So just doing a little bit more of this, like, you know, the dropships are coming in right as Flash is starting to spread out, and because right at the period where Flash is trying to spread out is the point at which he has the fewest amount of units spread the thinnest. It's now continuing to do this harassment. Notice that there isn't that big of an emphasis on Vultures. Just enough Vultures to mine everything up to defend these tanks. And this is just such a brutal harassment to do. A lot of this is thanks to Really's early Vulture positioning, where he was able to set up mines here. Only just now did Flash really clear off his half of the map, but still, if we kind of draw a line like this and look to the right, we have a lot of red all over the place. And the one advantage Flash does have, being the defender here, excuse me, is that he has the sight range advantage. All his buildings can, you know, see everything that's going on. It really has a little bit of an issue with the sight range, but of course the mines are going to help out quite a bit with that. Here's an interesting choice. We see Really expanding to this top location. So if you're Really right now, you know that you've gotten your 3 bases up a little bit earlier. You know your opponent's gotten his 3 bases up a little later, and you've managed to do some damage. Should you expand up here, or should you expand down here? Well, we've already seen that Really has these 3 dropships, probably a 4th and a 5th one coming at some point in the near future, which means that already Really probably has a lot of his units here. Will eventually be rallying up here, but if you have dropships, bouncing back and forth to defend this place is pretty easy. It's not going to be too big of a challenge, and if you go all the way down here, you worry about being super spread out, and your opponent, who's pretty tightly closed together, can do dropping up here in your main and then run Vultures down and into here. Mainly it's the main and this expansion that become a little bit vulnerable once you've stretched out and taken your right half of the map. So that's one thing that is nice. One thing that Matchpoint allows for is these interesting expanding patterns. Really only 2 big ones to note, which would be to take this one as your 4th or this one as your 4th. And every now and again you get a nice little Zerg who wants to curl like that. He'll go joink over like that, but again, no Zergs in this match. But yeah, I do like that choice to take that top expansion. The dropships will allow big ease for bouncing back in between these locations, and if you already have an aggressive composition, once again, the biggest key to defending this expansion is to have control of this high ground pod as the aggressor, because again, the units are going to pass like this, or, you know, if you're being really aggressive, they'll pass like this, thereby defending it. Obviously, if we'd taken this expansion and we're moving our troops up like this, we're making this expansion more vulnerable. The closer we get to our opponent's base, the more vulnerable this expansion is. Whereas, again, if we have this, the closer we are to our opponent's base, the more well-defended this is. If you are intending on playing very defensively and very passively and sort of powering up, you might want to take your top left expansion as Flash first, instead of that bottom expansion. But of course we see Flash trying to run in here, but I mean he's already sustained so much damage. I didn't get a good food count from Really, but I'm pretty sure he just hit 3 digits, and Flash still looked to be at about 70. So pretty significant. This really is looking bad. Really tried as hard as he could to build down there, but there was a whole bunch of little mines laid out everywhere. And what I do like about this map is that there's this mineral natural here, which kind of encourages players to do a lot of vulture action. Never be afraid to get a mineral expansion as your plan. A lot of players just gun straight for the gas in this matchup in particular. But getting that mineral expansion is great because you can keep replenishing vultures, allowing you to maintain aggression, and you can really ramp up the rate of expansion. Notice how this expansion only just recently finished, and this expansion's already getting started, and the top left expansion looks like really is starting up as well. Again, virtually impossible situation for Flash to be in at this point. We do see that +1 attack upgrade. Oh, big sigh. But I love this, because it was a really dominating game from Really. There's nothing... Oh, God, there's just not much that I can see Flash being able to pull off that would allow him to, get back into this game. But again, Really just did a very simple thing. He saw those Goliaths early on, and he kept hammering the back of Flash's base with drops. I mean, that's one thing that you really don't do in this matchup, which is to just constantly ferry vultures into the back of your opponent's main. Because, a lot of times your opponent will, get the hang of it and start, really punishing you for it. The fact is that there were just too many immobile units for Flash. So that attacking, even if it couldn't kill off any SCVs, still delayed any movement into the center. And of course, the very instant that Flash did move into the center, Really had 2, and then eventually 3 dropships dropping the back. But Really doesn't continue to do this big dropship play. Instead, he's favoring this mass tank plus vulture type pushing action. But those dropships seemed like a nice incorporation into his play. It wasn't this transition into a big drop-heavy mid-game, where you just unload your entire army, siege up, and then, never move for the remainder of the game. Instead, it was 1, and then eventually 2 and 3 dropships geared towards harassment because of the position that he had set himself up into. We see Flash trying to do something. Trying to get a little nugget of offense going on there, but, nothing really is going to come out of it. Those 3 dropships are doing wonders for Really still at this stage in the game. And this is probably my favorite part of this game, is this transition into passivity from Really, right? He pushed up here, he did a ton of damage, and then he's just sitting here, and he's expanding here, and sieging tanks here, and he's loading up into dropships and focusing on defense. And this transition into passivity, I'm actually going to rewind it just a little bit up until right. This is right when this attack was happening at Flash's front. This is almost at the 17-minute mark in this YouTube video. And then, so right now we're at 17 minutes. And Really is pretty much going to stop all aggression. And he's just going to expand a ton. So we're seeing him expand up here. You actually saw a little bit more red get plopped down there. It looked like some more factories got built. Most of the units for Really are actually here on his half of the map. Just moving around here, and then, okay, so when I started this rewind, I said I was at the 17-minute mark. I'm now at the 19-minute mark, and look, things being placed up in siege mode. We have some mines there, turrets being constructed. Looks like Really's trying to clear this out a little bit. More of Really's units are just right here on his half of the map. That is an unbelievably strong thing to do, really in any matchup. After you've really put the pressure on your opponent, maybe I shouldn't use the word passivity because, passive tends to have all these negative connotations in all these games. It sounds like you're just sitting around not doing anything, but really, instead I should say the emphasis shifts away from attacking and towards expanding. Because once your opponent's at a serious economic detriment and you expand a bunch, it forces him to come attack you. It forces you to it forces your opponent to attack you. It forces your opponent to take risks he may not want to take. We see this is a really uncomfortable position for Flash to be in, where he's moving forward with all these, well, actually not all these dropships, just 3 dropships, just trying to do something. It's not even really going to be very strong. He's kind of in a vulnerable situation right here. So this really is not going to be the best position. I mean, look at this, just getting absolutely decimated. And at this point, really doesn't even need to do too much focus on, being super cost-effective. If he runs up here and loses a tank or 2 to mines, it's not really the biggest, deal. He's already at, a 5 base to 2 base lead. And then look at this, using the Goliaths to target the dropships. That, I actually think, is the main reason that Flash left right here instead of in, like a minute or 2 when he was really screwed. If you're in a lead for your opponent, and if you are in a lead against your opponent, and he does some drop like this, just take your Goliath and target these dropships, because then that immediately kills your opponent's ability to be aggressive. I mean, probably most of the time in this matchup, you're just going to want to be focusing on having your stuff kill his stuff, because you're normally pretty close, and if you try to get too fancy and kill off his dropships, he'll just kill all your stuff and then, take whatever key point he wanted to. So, as a result, I just want to point out that don't always suicide to kill dropships, but a lot of times can be really useful. And the reason why it's useful is the fact that you kind of negate your opponent's ability to do any aggression for the later stages of the game. So now let us take some questions. I'm going to go ahead and mute this because I have a very long question from Hart. Hart says, Mr. 9, oh, thank you, but just call me by my first name, Day. I've been working on my build for Terran vs. Protoss. It's kind of different. I was wondering if you can help me out with something real quick. And I'm going to take this because it's a well-worded question. This has to do with mid-game planning, the rest of this question. And let me, before I answer Hart's question and read it out, let's just come back and discuss the mid-game a little bit here that happened. So, Reely's mid-game plan was to do tons of aggression with vultures and tanks to set himself up into a good position. Flash's mid-game plan almost certainly was to sacrifice a bunch of map control in favor for having really big, strong, muscular units, so that way, when he did finally choose to push out, it would be very strong and he would get key control points he wanted to. We saw him make one attempt at that, trying to get control of his opponent's high ground pod, and it didn't quite work out so well. The reason that this mid-game plan swung really heavily in Reely's favor is the fact that it really exploited that vulture attack timing and did all those damage with the vultures. So Hart says, my mid-game goal is to get 1 factory to expand, survive to get 3 bases, get 6 factories, and push for the 4th. When I'm getting the 4th, I add 4x and upgrades ranged and +2 armor for Marines, so goons kill in 2 shots instead of... or, I guess, in more shots instead of 2. Let's see. That's a pretty complicated build order that's being described. It's a lot of transitioning. When you say, wow, +2 armor for Marines into the mid-game, I don't know if I so much agree with that transition. I'm going to come, you know what, just send me a PM on that, because that's a little bit technical, and I have an answer that would take too much time. So, Soulsword says, also, is blocking your opponent's natural with an early mine a viable strategy to further delay their economy, since detection takes a while to get? Absolutely. I mean, I undeniably think that mining up an expansion is a useful thing to do. I think one thing that's important to note, though, is that you should have to plant quite a few mines, because if you just have one there, he'll run up and it'll pop up and you kill it off. It's sometimes more useful in this matchup to plant 4, 5, 6, 7 mines. Even plant like a huge dense field, and having your mines be very, very, very close to one another is another big key. Because your opponent likes to move forward and sort of stop and go, so that way the mines can pop up and he can kill them off. So, I mean, if you have a lot of them really close together, you increase the probability that 5 will pop up at once and at least once will get there. So that's the thing that I would probably emphasize. I mean, really planting mines however you can anywhere. So Pidgeotto says, I didn't see Reely with any anti-air. Why do you think that Flash didn't decide to make any wraiths? The dropships were completely undefended. I would say that the main reason is that the Wraith serves the most temporary purpose. I think that that's one of the most common questions that are asked in a lot of matchups is that, oh, my opponent didn't have any anti-air. Doesn't that mean that I could just get air and do a ton of damage? What I like about, Pidgeotto's question is that it wasn't just, can't you just kill him with air then? It was instead along the lines of, well, these dropships are doing all this damage. Why not just get the Wraith for the dropships? The issue is that if you do get a Wraith, it's a little bit difficult to know what the Wraith can be useful for that long into the game. I think a Wraith, like maybe getting 1 or 2 Wraiths, not too many, may have been useful because that might have allowed Flash to push more aggressively after he dealt with the dropships. Undeniably, the Wraith is going to help against the dropships. It's going to do some damage against the dropships. It can fend him off for a little bit. But I think Flash wanted to dedicate as much gas as he could to just all those tanks and Goliaths and prepare for some sort of dropping in the mid-game. Normally, when you use Wraiths to help your pushes advance very quickly, very rapidly, you're using them in the earlier stages of the game. Once you get to this point, players have so much scan and so many mines set up that you need to be a little bit careful in trying to really advance forward rapidly, trying to, siege just in range of your opponent's tanks, but he can't see you, so you can kill him off. So I think the Wraith's purpose, their utility is so temporary that I'm a little bit about it. So JSH said, why did Flash get Goliaths first? It seems that he did not do anything useful with those early Goliaths. I think from Flash's point of view, let's actually go back to this game and rewind to these early stages right here. So we see both players doing their thing. Here's the Goliaths moving forward, trying to clear out these. Notice how early Flash is intending to expand here. But what's nice is that 4 Goliaths load up into a dropship. They take a lot of damage. They're reasonably good against everything. Against all mech units, that is. I guess they're reasonably good against Medic Marine, too. But see, right here, this dropship, I think Flash was intending for it to do quite a lot of damage into Ridley's main. Because if you think about it, early on, my opponent, almost certainly, given the structure of this map, is going to be making a lot of vultures. This is kind of like, level 1 thinking. Level 0 thinking would be looking at this map and saying, what am I going to do? I'm going to get vultures, and I'm going to do a lot of damage and get map control. But then Flash is going, well, I know everyone's going to be wanting to do that. So if I can do the usual early expand, set up a nice economy, but do a very early Goliath drop, it's pretty much just going to be my Goliaths against vultures, and maybe a tank or two. I can swarm that tank, or at the very least, I can bounce back and forth between his two expansion locations, delay his aggression, delay all sorts of stuff, do a lot of damage. Everything seems good about it. The issue right now is this timing window right here, where really just snakes right around, and notice that really doesn't wait in the slightest. He guns right in there to do as much damage as possible. It's kind of funny about this. If Flash had just had a building right here, if he was just able to construct something very quickly right there, this would have done significantly less damage. But look at here, killing off already a few SCVs, snaking around to the backside. Flash has to run away, and just the fact that there's nothing mining here, the fact that it all had to pull back, is so much money lost. An tremendous amount of money being lost there. And notice the timing on this dropship. Right about here. Let's see if we can get up here. Yeah, this is where really is noticing that his opponent is getting these Goliaths. You can imagine right now going, oh my god, my vultures are really going to do a ton of damage here. I'm going to send them in to harass. I'm going to start building a dropship. Because I know that this harass at the front is going to do damage now, but then the front's going to get walled, but I'm going to continue to do vulture harass in the back, and that's exactly what we see. And that's what's kind of funny about that timing, is that it almost looked like really saw the Goliaths and went, oh shit, time to get a dropship, and just did it, and we're seeing how effective it is. And just a nice little scan there, just making sure there's nothing in the way. And of course the drop is now going to do so much damage, especially with this push coming out. So that's why, again, to answer the question, why did, he get Goliaths first? Because he assumed he was going to be up against only vultures and was going to do all this damage. if for some reason really didn't do that run-in with the vultures early on, Flash clearly would have been in an incredibly good position. So that's what I think I wanted to say about that. So we just have time for like 1 or 2 more questions. So Noob says, even though Flash didn't pull it off, is there anything you can do as a Terran if you know you're way behind to win the game? That's kind of a tough question, because it kind of depends on how far behind you are. You know, I mean, if it's like 4 base versus 5 base, you can always kind of get your way in there. But if it's like 1 base versus 2 base, you know, or 2 versus 3, or, you know, 2 versus 4, even as we saw in this game, it's pretty difficult. The way I want to answer that is to say, don't worry about how to come back from being behind. Instead, try to put all your energy into thinking about how to never be behind in the first place. There is nothing wrong with being one of those players who, if your strategy goes to plan, you crush your opponent. And you can deal with a lot of variations, but if you screw something up, you end up getting raped miserably. There's nothing wrong with that, because you actually have a great deal of success with it. And then once you've done that, the ways in which you're way behind become pretty common. They repeat. You end up seeing them a lot. So for instance, what's a good example? Like, let's say this was something you know, I've seen on Neo Harmony quite a few times. We have both players opening up with these mass vulture armies, but one player gets the edge and ends up containing his opponent, and the opponent's kind of like, not feeling too good. All of a sudden, you know, one player has like so many opportunities to expand, as vultures, mines, everywhere on the map, and there's one player who's kind of tucked away. That player who's sort of tucked away, who's lost map control, we would say, is behind, but he has this expansion up. A lot of times he'll have 5, 6 factories done, and he will have stockpiled quite a bit of gas. So he can immediately throw down a starport, start getting dropships, and then make a ton of tanks because he just has so much gas. And he can come back by using a lot of dropship and tank play, strategically taking expansions set up like that. So these are the things to think about. Depending upon what build you have done, there are ways in which you sort of slowly come back. I mean, that's a really easy one to talk about is, I've been making vultures. I have all this gas. Therefore, I can transition into a really huge muscular army more quickly because of my gas. So let's just do one more question. So Skrick says, Flash saw release first dropship with his dropship. Shouldn't this, in addition to having less vultures... Oh, sorry, I read over a word. So Skrick says, Flash saw release first dropship with his dropship. Shouldn't this, in addition to having less vultures, hint to incoming harass? I think so. Let me actually just take a brief look at what went on in those mid-game stages. So here is... There's the Goliaths, there's Flash looking focused, coming in here. And I really want to see the moment that it reached Flash's base. It looks like Flash had some stuff back there. Actually, that is a great point. I don't think there's anything wrong with having 3 or 4 tanks siege at your expansion as Flash, and then just having the rest sort of hanging out in your main until you have a better sense of what's going on. I mean, Flash's push is coming out right now. He was originally going to do the, he was doing the attack after the Vulture Harass would have happened anyways, so yeah, I think that's a good observation. Again, those are the sorts of little things that you should take advantage of. That's the sort of thing that you shouldn't have your gameplay revolve around. I mean, obviously, you know, Flash can't just assume, I'm just going to dropship Harass right when his dropship would be coming out, you know, like, so I think in that circumstance, I think that's an appropriate comment to make. So that's going to wrap up Day 9 Daily number 46. Today, I'm actually going to be doing myself against G5. Some games we played in the name of the tournament, I can't seem to remember, but it's 2 games we played. One where I screwed up. I mean, I kind of butchered my build in the first game, and the next one says... the next one says, you know, the next one ends up being pretty good. I think I executed it decently well. But, by the way, someone asking about the song names. The ones that we're playing before were Que Sera by Wax Taylor, and Influx by DJ Shadow. And of course, to clear something up, Chronocon says your TSL2 caster bio says that you're Tasteless's younger brother. I was certain that you were the older brother. Is this correct? Yes, I am the younger brother. I'm 23. My brother's 25. But in one of my casts, I told a story, and I accidentally just said that my brother was 6 and I was 8. Don't know how I screwed that up. So, apologize for lying, everyone. But yeah, again, we are doing the TSL2 cast this weekend. My brother Nartosis will be doing on Saturday. Me and Chill will be doing on Sunday. So I'm pretty pumped up to see everything happen then. So all of you should tune in to the PokerStrategy.com TSL2. And tune in to watch me think about my games tomorrow. There'll actually be games that I win. And again, serious apologies to G5 in case I'm being rude, but it's my damn TV show. Ha! Alright, take care everyone, and cheers.